Life on Side B is a podcast of Holy Ourselves, which helps integrate faith and sexuality through spiritual direction, cohorts, and resources. Learn more at holyourselves.org, WHOLLY ourselves.org. Today's episode talks about living with HIV. For some, this may seem like an unrelated or unnecessary topic, but I really want to encourage you, regardless of who you are, to listen. We share in the episode a bit on why this topic is so important, and it's not the first time we have discussed it on the podcast. But even since we recorded this episode at the beginning of January, we have seen access to care and prevention for HIV come under threat, especially in the United States, but also abroad. With the freezing of U.S. international aid that has occurred and the potential health service cuts that are likely to be implemented, HIV care has already begun to be affected. Even just this month, the Supreme Court decided to hear a case where Christian business owners are arguing that health insurance coverage of the medication called PrEP, which is the medication that helps prevent HIV infections, is a violation of religious freedom because it endorses, quote, homosexual sex, unquote. I want to clarify something here. This is not a gay disease. We will also talk about that more in this episode, but care for this marginalized community is under threat when there is still so much social stigma around this virus. It takes true courage for individuals like our friend Nhat to speak up and share his story, and we are forever grateful. So please listen well and support our siblings living with HIV and those at risk of it, because they need our support now more than ever. Hello, listeners. Welcome back for another episode of Life on Side B. I am joined today by not one of the regular co-hosts, but someone you've already heard twice before now, 3 times with a bonus episode, my own partner, Christian Johnston.
Hello, everyone. Glad to be here again.
Oh my gosh, twice in a season.
I know. Well, twice in a month even.
Twice in a month.
Yeah.
Craziness. Christian is joining me because we are going to be doing a special episode. This is not one of the co-host episodes that we've been doing this season. This is not one of the follow-up interviews. As we told you all, we wanted to do some listener requested topics, and really engage with some topics that maybe we haven't before or in more detail. So, we are joined today by our very good friend, Nhat. Nhat, so glad to have you with us.
Thank you so much. It's so good to be here. I know we were talking about this episode for a while now, and really glad that I made it on to the last one
You did.
Of the season. Yeah, and I also want to say your podcast has been so uplifting and just provided a lot of hope for people like me. I remember listening to one of the podcasts and just sending a message on the Instagram, just telling Side B, Life on Side B, how much I appreciate, and so it was great. It's been great.
And I got to receive that message, so I'm so thankful for it. So today we are talking about living with HIV, and some of you guys know that we've done a previous episode on it. And Christian works in HIV, as we've talked about. We mentioned it on the last.
Yeah, I think so. With my life update.
With your life update. And as this is a topic that was written in as one wanting to hear a little bit more about, and Nhat, you and I, we've talked about this for a little bit, originally. And so we just felt like between wanting to hear your story and then wanted Christian to kind of co-host this episode with me because of your experience in all of this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, then why don't you go ahead with our first question?
All right, Nhat, if you could, please share with us, our audience, how you identify and a short bit about your journey of reconciling your faith with your sexuality.
Yeah, so right now I identify as queer. It's just a umbrella term that I have just reclaimed. has gone through a long journey with it, and had a pretty hard relationship between faith and sexuality. I think I went through a really hard season, and it has to do with HIV as well. And I think in that time, Josh Proctor was part of that journey, in that part of that story with me. And so it's been a difficult journey. And I think last year was such a momental season, because I attended my first Revoice last year, and I didn't expect the impact it had on me, of just to be in the same space with my faith and sexuality being represented and celebrated in the same space. And that was just so weird, because I can see those two things separately, but to see them in harmony and just in worship before the Lord was just something that was just groundbreaking for me. And so, yeah, that's kind of where I am. But
I would even, having been at Revoice and seeing you there, I can definitely vouch for that experience of yours, because your eyes were just lit up and you were filled with joy the whole time. So
Totally.
it was a great
Thank you.
experience
Yeah.
there.
And it's so cool. Like you're hearing all these people and you're seeing them, through a screen, and then you're able to see them in person. Is just, it's like a family reunion.
Totally. And getting to hear you share scripture.
Yes.
Sage.
Yes.
That was amazing.
That was great.
Loved it. So you mentioned that obviously HIV is part of your journey, part of your story. Can you kind of hone in on that, of how HIV has been part of or influence your journey, both spiritually and personally?
Yeah. So I guess this is a quick coming out story, how it started. But I was raised in a Christian family. My dad's a pastor, and it's been something that I've always been dealing with since I was young. And in 2015, gay marriage was legalized, and that was like kind of like, that discussion was happening. Churches were talking about it, and so I just felt like, okay, would be a time to jump on this bandwagon to let my parents know this is my feelings and what's going on internally. And so share with my parents, and they did not take that well. It was a really hard discussion, and I was probably 21. And after I came out with my parents, they prayed for me like they were casting out a demon on me. And a week after that event, it was my birthday, and I turned 21, and on that day my house burned down.
Oh my gosh. I don't know why. The moment you said it was your birthday, I was like expecting something awful to happen.
I know. House burned down.
I wasn't.
Luckily, everyone survived. It was a crazy time. But just through conversation with my parents, their language and the word they're using of just like, oh, we should ask God for forgiveness and stuff like that, as if this was brought upon us because of me. And whether they meant that or that's what they were saying, that's how I took that as, wow, God is, punishing me. And so I lived with this guilt and just with the shame of my identity. And if God can't love me, then that's fine. And so then in that time, I started to live a sexual promiscuous life for a little while. And that was when I contracted the HIV. And I felt like I didn't understand enough of just the health side of it, of what it is. And so it was a very scary time. Just receiving that diagnosis. And I remember when I received that message, just the first question is like, will I be okay? Will I be okay? And the doctor really, helped, but he's very, very standoffish, very just professional. So it was just kind of hard to find comfort in that. And I remember just going back to my car and closing the door, and the first thing that I could utter was hallelujah, praise God. And I just praise him, because it was something that I know that God's hand was in it. And if God didn't intervene, I would have continued down this lifestyle and this path and killed myself. And so this was something that's a wake-up call for me, and it's just like a reminder of, my life is not my own, and my life is completely in God's hands, and so I have to trust in Him. And that was when it was my personal wake-up call to turn back to the Lord. And I was able to use just the story to help, other people with HIV, to just share, my faith story of, my journey. So.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. It hits heavy to hear the pain and struggle that is part of that journey in navigating it on a personal level and with your family dynamics. And really honored to hear. As you share the personal side, we would also love to hear more about what role has your church or your faith community played in your health journey, and have you encountered any support or harmful reactions regarding your status and or your sexuality?
Yeah. So faith family, I will start off with saying, my church group at the time, my youth group, were really supportive. Even though there was a lot of questions of, okay, can we still share drinks, or can we still hug you? There's questions that people are processing and learning about this as well. My parents, I feel like coming out to them as gay was one thing, but coming out with HIV is something completely different. It's another step. And they are having a hard time processing that, because from what they learn and know, it's like a death sentence, and so it's a very scary thing. And so I have to walk with them through that, and that was hard. Church wise, I was in a situation with my church that things were being said, and that led to people, the organization, having an investigation and having a conversation with me about my sexuality. And I think my vision was like, oh, okay, these people want to learn and want to seek answers and want to help. And so I was completely honest and open about everything. But what happened in that time was, they actually brought up my health records, and asked me very uncomfortable questions about my personal sex life. And it wasn't until afterwards that I looked back and like, that was really weird. I did not appreciate, and I wonder, would they have asked me these questions if I was straight, or would they ask me these questions if I had my wife with me? And that was something that I even told them, is like, I wish my wife was here to answer your questions, because it felt really uncomfortable. And so I just wish that they could see my diagnosis as a health condition and not a moral failure. And I feel like that in that time, it felt like I was being treated as a moral failure. And so that's just my experience with that church.
Definitely. If I could add one thing on what you're saying there, I have a beloved colleague who has been living with HIV for over 30 years, and she really loves to remind people that HIV, the H stands for human, because it is a condition that humans acquire, not gays or specific subgroups, but humans. And when it first came onto the scene in the 80s, it was not diagnosed. It was misnomered as a gay disease. And so, yeah, people using a health diagnosis to target people. And you're an example of that's still something that is ongoing, because a lot of people would try to go, well, HIV is not really a big deal anymore. But it is. It's ongoing, and it's still affecting people heavily today because of things like stigma, which we'll talk about later.
Yeah. I totally agree. I feel like even just the title of being gay seems like a disease. We carry just the shame of it as if it's something that is so it's so wrong, and you can't be around kids. And so, yeah, I feel like it's been hard, you know?
Yeah. And I think that obviously there's this like crossover when you're talking about HIV, especially within a side B context, because as you're saying, then it suddenly gets connected to moral failure.
Yeah.
It's no longer this like just simply a health status situation. It becomes, if whether, in your situation, being married or even celibate, wherever, it becomes connected to like, how did you acquire it and all of these things. But I love how you were saying earlier about how you were able to find like just kind of resting in God that this was not the end, like that there was more to come through this, that like you were saying, it's not saying that the status is great, you don't want this, but like that this is not the end of that story. And I guess to follow up on that, would love to hear in the midst of like these really challenging aspects relationally with it, what are some of the ways your HIV status has shaped your understanding of love or community or grace? Maybe.
Yeah. And I think it's so cool because I always felt like my sexuality, has a purpose in God's grand narrative, in that, I can use my testimony story to help people who are in similar, to my background, as Asian Americans, also, as a PK or as a person living with HIV. There's so many things that, God has crafted us specifically for a demographic of people. And I think this is just helping me narrow and focus on there's a group of people that now I identify with, and now I can minister to and share the hope that we have. So I think that's really important. Also, just the language we use in the LGBT community around HIV is unclean. It's like, are you unclean? Or sorry, are you clean? And so there's like an identity attached to that. And it reminds me so much of just biblical times when they're using words like leprosy. You have to say, I'm unclean, and it becomes such an identity thing. And just a few weeks ago, I was reading a story in the Old Testament of Moses and how God was using him to be a sign of God's power. And one of the signs that God gave Moses was to reach his hand into his cloak, and when he pulled it out, his hands was full of leprosy. And God told him to, put the hand back in the shirt and take it out again, and it was clean. And it was as if God was saying, like, I have control of everything in the world, including diseases, right? And even that is used to be a sign of God's power. And so for me to take ownership of that, like, I have HIV, but it's not hopeless, because I know my life is in God's hands ultimately, and I'm going to use this for God's glory, and it's a sign of God's power through me, and how I'm going to choose to present and use that.
Well, powerful.
Woo!
Okay, going to church.
Yeah. I definitely got some goosebumps while you're talking.
Yeah. Gosh.
So Nhat, as well, how do you manage your health physically and mentally while balancing the demands of faith, marriage, and your identity?
Yeah, and I thank you for including marriage, because I'm also in a mixed orientation marriage, and my wife is in the medical field as well, and so she was very educated on the subject. And so sharing this with my parents was hard, but sharing this with my wife, at the time she wasn't my wife. She was somebody I was interested in. And that was a hard conversation. And even, just to share, getting into a relationship and to be completely transparent was really difficult. But she was really supportive. And like, she stuck with me. She reminds me of the medication. And so it feels like I'm not alone in this. And that has been really great. And to people who don't know, it's living with HIV. You take a pill every day. I happen to take Biktarvy. And it's a daily pill, which helps lowers my viral load, which means that I am not able to transmit this to anybody. I can have kids. I will not give it to other people, and we're fine. And for me, it's such a daily reminder of how weak my body is and how dependent I am in God. It's the closest comparison. It's like taking communion. I know you're taking communion as a reminder of God's body, Jesus, that's broken for you. And I take this medication daily. It's a very spiritual thing too. I take it, and it's just a reminder to myself that my life is dependent on God, and that I don't live alone with it. So
I love that imagery. I've never thank you so much for explaining about undetectable, because I think it's so important that people need to understand living with HIV. As long as you are taking your medication regularly, you won't transmit this. You can be in a married, you can be in a sexual relationship, you can have children, and you're not going to transmit this. But I love the imagery of, I've never thought of that with communion, the way that we are consuming something to show our dependence and the frailty of our bodies in that. That's a gorgeous imagery.
Yeah. And for those that don't know, there's some messaging to help disseminate this reality that you can suppress your viral load and not pass it on to others. You equals you. People have probably seen this messaging before, but don't really know what it means. But it means undetectable equals untransmittable. I'm the one who works in HIV. Forgetting it. But it's very important messaging because even earlier you were sharing about the modes of transmission a little bit, about how people would ask, well, if I hug you, am I going to get this? And
sharing
people are just really in the dark on how it operates as a disease, how it's transmitted, how it works. So anything we're able to do to educate others and help them understand and destigmatize is going to be super helpful.
Yeah. And I would love, leads us great into the next question that I would love for both of you to respond on. Now please feel free to go first, but what are some common misconceptions of living with HIV that you have experienced that you really wish to dispel, among Christian world, but also Christian?
Yeah, I think we said a lot of it. I think when I shared with people, their first question is, can I still, can I give you a hug? Is that okay? Or then can we share drinks? Or I even had a friend who said, I prefer not sharing drinks, even though I know, but it just makes me feel better. And I don't know how to feel about that, but that's fine. Stuff like that. And I think that's why there's this fear of LGBT people helping in children's ministry, or just this fear of oh no, you could transmit this to my kids and stuff like that. I don't know. I just have this feeling that that's maybe that's not true, but it's just kind of the feeling I get.
No, it's so true. Yeah. Do you have more to share there?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. There's so many things, honestly, that could be said. Because in my line of work, we try to take a very holistic approach to caring for those living with HIV, but also to help the broader population be educated to avoid acquiring HIV. Because even though it's miraculous that we have the medications that we do today to keep people alive, you get to live in a full lifetime, but if it had been 30 years ago, your life would be cut drastically short by comparison. That's miraculous in itself, but we're still not at a point where this disease is not an issue globally. And so I think that I think honestly it's important to just bring things down to the essentials, even if we're talking about the Christian community or the broader community, helping people understand how does it operate. That way you can dispel the fear around it.
Yeah.
So honestly, one of the things that we do when we always work the Pride events locally as a program, and one of the games we play is we ask people, do you know the 5 modes of transmission? And then they'll sit there trying to answer them. And almost no one can actually name all 5.
Can you do it right now?
Yeah. Do you want me to, or do you want to try?
Wait, I want to try as well. Wait, so
okay, go ahead. Yeah, you try.
Ways that can be transmitted?
Yes. Yeah, the 5 modes of transmission for HIV. And I guess fluid-wise.
Yeah, fluids.
Fluids-wise. Okay, so we have blood.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Absolutely.
We have semen.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We have breast milk.
Yep. Absolutely.
We have needles. Wait, does that count?
Well, needles would fall under the blood category.
Blood.
Yep.
Fair. And Josh,
two
you can
others
say the
are a
last
little
two.
Yeah, I could say the last two because I wouldn't have gotten them before Christian started working in this either.
I mean, I wouldn't have before I started working.
Like vaginal secretion.
Yep. Secretions.
Yeah. Vaginal secretion and anal secretion.
Yes. So altogether, those are the 5 modes of transmission. And then if you know, for instance, these modes of transmission, then that starts to give you a framework to work off of as you destigmatize your understanding of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
That's
I think.
good.
Were you going to say something there? I didn't want
Yeah.
to cut you.
Or you can switch to a new topic.
No. I had a few thoughts here.
Okay, go ahead.
So go ahead.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Okay. All right. I think it's a good time to talk about my mental health too when it comes to HIV.
Yeah.
Because it's mentally taxing, because you have to worry about getting all the forms correctly so that your medication can come and making sure, it's sent to the right. It's just there's a lot of mental things that you got to be aware of, like traveling, missing a dose. There's a lot of things. And I think it's gotten better. But I just get a call from Walgreens and they remind me, hey, your medication, do you want to refill now? Or how many pills you have left? Did you miss any dose? And they really help make this process much easier. But right now in North Carolina, I don't know how it is everywhere, but we're switching systems to Medicaid and things. And so it's been a little bit kind of mentally taxing. I'm trying to figure that out and make sure we get our medication in time. So that's another thing I feel like people should know about and be aware.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And especially like that's where it's so great that you have someone like your wife who is knowledgeable,
right?
That can be of support. And it's like there are people who feel so afraid to tell people about their status. They're going through this on their own, except for with their doctor, if they even feel like comfortable with doctors, because often queer people don't have great relationships with doctors. I'm one of those people. And like, I can understand that it would be like the compounding nature of like how isolated you are, who you can talk to. And like, especially then if you don't have someone else going through it with you, it's like compounding in that way so much. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think something else I also see in my work with clients is, once you've been living with HIV long enough, sometimes you also run into occurrences where maybe the medication isn't being as helpful as it should be, or a viral load goes up when it shouldn't be. And then, it adds those additional layers of stress because you're now having to go through the steps, getting the blood work done and talking with your doctors and figuring out, do we need to change the regimen or what's going on? Why is your body reacting this way? And I feel like that would also add a lot of stress.
Yeah, that's true. It's not something you want to go through alone. And so it'll be nice to have like a community, a faith community, or, a partner to go through that with.
I did think of another misconception thing I'd like to touch on really quick, and it's spicy.
Go ahead, do it.
So I specifically work in the HIV and AIDS program for Palm Beach County in South Florida. The reason is because we are one of the jurisdiction level 1s for the United States, meaning we have really high HIV transmission rates in our county. Not even just our county, but our area. It's just that our counties in Florida are so large.
Yeah.
Because of that, I'm very keenly aware of the demographics that are most heavily impacted by HIV in our communities. And so as I've been looking at the question here on, what sort of misconceptions do you see and how could it particularly affect Christian communities? I keep coming back to the fact that a lot of our community partners and people living with HIV will constantly bring up the church as being one of those last bastions where a lot of good could be done. But it is like pulling teeth to get Christians actually compassionate or caring about the conversation. And because of the demographics in our county that are affected, it's easy to see that it's primarily minority groups. And then as much as Christians would likely hope that it's only in the gay community, our demographic is actually half heterosexual transmission. That being said, if Christians want to continue stigmatizing HIV as being strictly gay, they probably feel better and can pat themselves on the back pretending it doesn't affect them because, well, the queer community deserves to suffer.
Right.
And it sucks to have to even consider trying to get people to feel compassionate because it can affect them. But I think a helpful thing to change is the misconception that this is truly a gay disease. It's not. It is very heavily prevalent in the heterosexual community, but since it also affects minority groups, I think the majority in this country, at least, isn't as inclined to care.
Right. That's good.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's really important because I think it gets, I just remember being a kid in the 90s and like being the openly gay kid in high school. And I'll be honest, like I've talked about this with people in our church. I don't know if I've talked about it here on the podcast, but like I remember being that teenager thinking one day I'm going to die of HIV. That was just like the thought. Because again, we were at a period where there wasn't a lot.
Well, PrEP didn't exist.
PrEP didn't exist.
And PEP didn't exist.
None of it really existed. So there was just this thinking that this is a high possibility. And so I know that our community inside B is sometimes feels a little bit distant from this conversation, which I think we brought up in the last HIV episode as well. But it is our history. And also, it's not just us. This is not a gay issue. Like, so I love that because we about it, but many times the straight community does it.
That's right. And I feel like it's not that long ago either. It was just in the late 1980s. These people that been through this are still alive. And I've seen how things have changed as well. And so
yeah, totally. Leslie Hudson Reynolds has said multiple times, like who really prevalently lived through the AIDS epidemic. They would not mind me saying it. Like they'll look through the contacts on their phone, and there are people in there that they don't know if they're alive or dead because it was so rampant. And it's like we carry that in our bodies, even if we didn't go through it, and even if we're not sexually active, even if we've never had it, it's been mentally so tied to like LGBT experiences. And as you said, we often like just carry our sexuality as a disease and now let alone then this.
Right. And really this conversation has led me to have so much compassion and really helped me make the step to side B, because it was hard to, from side X and Y, growing up in the church, it was hard to see how like the LGBT community and the Pride community, like what were they celebrating, Yeah. And it was a friend of mine that brought up like, there's not that many queer people in this age range because of the AIDS epidemic. And that just kind of struck me. I was like, that's so true. This is such a recent thing. And our people has gone through something so drastic. And so it makes sense and why they bond together and like have something to celebrate. I think that has really changed my views on a lot of things. And just really helped me make that step in that's right. There is something here to celebrate. And so,
Beautiful.
Definitely. So we just spent time talking about misconceptions and things that the Christian community could maybe take a more critical look at. But what do you think, Nhat, queer people of faith, particularly those living with HIV, how could you be better supported by the broader Christian community?
Oh, what a good question. How can we support the Christian community?
Invite God's people to sit with you and figure out how to love you better.
Yeah, I think it'd be nice if she's educated on the subject a little bit more. I think moving away from the purity culture, right? It would be nice to have open discussion on real topics of sexual health. I think it's been kind of a hard thing to talk about in church spaces. And I've been to this one church because I've been visiting churches, and in their first time guest bag, they had coupons for local things in that area. And I thought that was kind of pretty nice. I never been to a church where they had like actual local things and supporting local businesses. And I really think, I don't expect all churches to understand or support like the clinics and things like that. But if your church happens to be in an area with a clinic, I think churches should volunteer and should help out. If your church is in any, wherever location, it should help the local things around you. I think there's a verse. Give me 1 second. I think it's in Jeremiah, when God's people are in Babylon, Babylon, and they were like, what are we supposed to do? And God says, how about you plant and you get jobs and you seek the welfare, the benefit of that place, of that local place. Because if it prospers, you too will prosper.
Come on, Bible knowledge.
Let's go. And so, we should want to seek the welfare of our local clinics and local things around us. And because if it thrives, the church will thrive.
Mm-hmm. Woo! Okay.
Taking into the basics.
Love it. Love it. And if I can add on to that, the thing I want to encourage churches, I think we might have said it in the thing that when we talked, and I know we said it in that workshop that we did together, but churches talking about HIV, talking about sexual health is not changing your views on sexual ethics. It is about saving lives. It is about keeping people alive. It is about helping people in the midst of our messiness, in the midst of us learning to grow, even making mistakes, to not have lasting consequences of mistakes, and allowing people to live more holistic lives. So like sometimes we can fear that these kind of topics are endorsing sexual activity outside of the biblical narrative and the biblical framework, but this is about lives. So that's something else I'd love to add.
That's good. Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I feel like it's just really lazy ministry work to not see any complexities in life and not learn how to navigate the nuances of people's lived experiences. Super lazy and honestly dishonoring to God. Straight up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, great.
I want to thank you, Nhat, for I want to give you more space for whatever, if there's anything else you would like to share about, but I want to thank you both for your boldness of sharing about your story, because it's not easy. It's not easy. But it's needed. And I love the heart that you have for the gospel of seeing it as an opportunity to care for a community of people that need to know that God loves them and need to know that there is a future for them, and you're doing that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any last words?
Is there anything else you would like to share?
Let me think. I don't think I have anything that I have to share. Yeah. Thank you so much.
You are a blessing, and we can't wait to get to know you more. And so glad you're able to be on Life on Site B.
I know. It's been such a wonderful community of people, and I've been able to make connections with people. And I think it has really strengthened and just such an encouragement to my walk and my faith. And know that we are plowing this kind of this old road, but it's like such a new road, like Life on Side B. Side B is just such a new, it's a new thing. It's a new way of discussing an old topic. I don't know, but we're doing something really awesome. I think we all get to be the pioneers of that. And so it's been incredible.
Yeah, isn't that fun? It's ours.
Yeah. I don't know.
So glad to be on this journey. Thank you as well.
We were born for such a time as this.
Such a time
as this. Yes. And even though this is the last season, of Life on Side B, it'll be such historical stamp, where people can look back to of just this is how far we have come. And so it's been such a blessing.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, because that's been that's my hope, is that Life on Site B, kind of like spiritual friendships, which is like no longer active, but it's like this archive of knowledge, which anyone who hasn't been on the spiritual friendship blog, you should go. There's a lot of content. That Life on Site B can be that for future generations of this. So awesome. Thank you both for joining. And thank you everyone for listening as we continue on this journey. Wrapping up Life on Site B. We'll talk to you next time.
Take care.
Everyone.
Bye.